This is the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast.
With that, should we start a new Wheel of Time book?
So, in the heart of winter, shall winter's heart be born?
We have to read the whole quote.
Okay, but I'm just saying, it's not exactly, literally on the solstice, which I guess maybe it's winter's heart in Australia.
It is actually winter's heart in Australia right now. That is the other thing we should mention is that we are recording this on the great and glorious first day of summer here in the Pacific Northwest at the beginning of our first proper heat wave. It is bright. It is hot. It is summer solstice. And yeah, our friends down under are all going to finally start getting some of this delicious sunlight back into their lives as the next few days progress. Well, the next 6 months. Technically. But yes, it's not really winter's heart so much as winter's like nose, kneecaps. Winter's heart's in the middle, right? Like we're more in an extremity. This is the beginning.
Well, and then okay, obviously like temperature follows light, right? Like
yes,
it has to be dark for a while before it really gets cold. But in a lot of ways, you could say the heart of winter is when it's the darkest, not necessarily the coldest.
Yeah, I guess it really just depends. Yeah, so I guess, if we're going with the heart of winter as being a light thing, then yes. Yeah. It is the heart of winter, not where we are.
Not where we are. In the other hemisphere.
Yes, where a lot of our fans are, including some that are here in the chat today. Looking at you, Liligen Antipodes.
All right, so Winter's Heart, the book where the cleansing happens, eventually. And a lot of other things happen in the meantime. We get Matt back, so there's some really great Matt chapters in here, and some really good Rand chapters as well. Yeah,
it gets a little glacial in terms of slogginess because it is Winter's Heart, and there's a lot of snow. So it gets a little glacial, but you know.
All right, so the book opens up with a prophecy. We'll do the prophecy. The seals that hold back night shall weaken, and in the heart of winter shall winter's heart be born. Amid the wailing of lamentations and the gnashing of teeth, for winter's heart shall ride a black horse, and the name of it is death.
I feel like there's a quote somewhere about a pale horse whose rider is death.
Yeah, isn't that like a Bible thing? Yeah,
from somewhere. Mm-hmm. I'm vaguely aware of it.
Incarnations of Immortality by Piers Anthony. Book 1 is on a pale horse. And that main character is Death. It's a man who inherits the mantle of death. And that's where I first learned, because I wasn't exposed to the Bible until much later in my life, that the rider of a pale horse is Death. The horse also turns into a cool car with a license plate. Pale horse.
See, I mainly know it from the meme of the tiny black kitten sitting on the stuffed unicorn. That's mainly where I know it from.
Oh, how have our classical educations completely failed us? Come on, school. What have you been doing? Jesus.
School has been having a separation of church and state like it fucking should be. Yeah. I'm teaching the goddamn Bible. I actually did learn the Old Testament in school, but it was more as a cultural narrative than as a Bible study thing. It was more just how they themed third grade was let's learn the story of the world as told through the Old Testament, which was whatever. We were third graders. We were easily entertained.
But if we want to break this down a little bit, the seals that hold back night shall weaken. We've got the 7 seals. 3 of them are busted at this point. The other ones, you can carve a shred off of them like Moraine does. They're ready for the Dark One to break out at any time. In the heart of winter, right? This is the middle of winter right now in the books.
The season should be winter.
Yeah, the season's been winter, because remember, in the last book, they used the Bowl of Winds, which created a whole wild swing from massive summer to massive winter, which kind of feels like what's going on here in reverse right now.
Yep.
And then sort of Winter's Heart is basically referring to Rand and how he's hardening himself to Quendiar and riding a horse of death. He is killing a lot of people. He's doing a lot of murder. There's a lot of war going on. Things are bad.
So Rand is Winter's Heart, and he is riding a black horse. His name is Death.
Yes.
That is Rand.
That is Rand. That's my interpretation.
Also, literally, Winter's Heart has come about because of the Bowl of the Winds. By sheer coincidence, there's two interpretations that just happen to work. But no, I think that from the perspective of the Koreathon cycle, which is where this comes from, this is definitely talking about
Well,
Rand.
I mean, prophecies of the dragon, right? Like, it's, I kind of always assume they're referring to Rand and his journey with the Koreathon cycle.
But it just so happens the dragon is one with the land and the land is one with the dragon. And Winter's Heart did literally just get born from the Bowl of the Winds onto the land.
Right.
Just by sheer coincidence.
Nope, not coincidence.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's sort of, I imagine the Winter's Heart hardening also has a lot to do with Rand being put in the box and his PTSD from that. And sort of how, again, because as I've said a million times, time is compressed. We're only about 5 weeks after Dumai's Wells.
Right. His sleep cycle has barely had a chance to recover. And we know it never does because it's Rand and he doesn't sleep.
Right.
But even if he did have a sleep cycle, it would have barely had a chance to recover by this point. Mm-hmm. And I would just like to point to live recording text where, in fact, the picture of the fuzzy black kitten on the stuffed white unicorn has been posted. And also a black cat on a white step stool, which I was not aware of that picture. But the second picture is the one that I've seen the meme of.
I think you found our Instagram art for this chapter.
Yes. Oh my God. Yes, I'm absolutely putting the pale horse kitten meme for our Instagram. Stay tuned for that on our social media at WoTSpoilers.
All right, so our goal for this chapter is there are two POVs, Ciane and Elayne. I want to do all of Ciane's POV. We're probably not going to get through all of Elayne's POV because we are probably not going to get to the sister bonding ceremony because there's so much to say with the character building and everything that goes on in that part of the chapter that I think we want to save that for the next section.
Yeah, just be warned, we're going to cut in what is narratively a logical place, but in terms of how the book lays out the POVs, it's not a logical break. It's just right in the middle, but we looked at it and that was, for us, a really strong story break. So knowing how we tend to override our expectations of how long things take, we decided to try to bite off less this time. Pray for us. Wish us luck.
And just so you have an idea of how long this prologue is, I actually broke down word counts for all the prologues. Other than Lord of Chaos, which comes in at 30k words, this one is the longest at 27k. All the other ones are closer to 10 to 15 up to this point. So this comes in probably at least twice as long as most of the other prologues, and the Elayne POV alone is longer than most of the other prologues that we get.
So we're really not being ridiculous by cutting this out.
No, not at all. The longest prologue is Knife of Dreams at 36,000 words. The shortest is The Shadow Rising at 0 words, because there's not a prologue.
Which is, right. But the first chapter really is so long, it has a prologue that just, they forgot to put the break in the right spot, is what happened.
Yeah, and if you count the first chapter as the prologue, that's at 15,000.
So it's still not remarkable.
No, still not. That's like the same as the Elayne POV.
Yeah.
And the thing is, these other ones that are long, Lord of Chaos is 30,000, Crossroads of Twilight is 32,000, Knife of Dreams is 36,000. All of those have many, they have up to 10 POVs in them. This chapter has 4. So even though those are longer prologues, this is the biggest single POV of any prologue in any book, which is why we're cutting it in the middle.
And I mean, who knows? Maybe this will be a 3-parter. Like, we'll see, We will see.
We'll see. Yeah, we'll see. No guarantees.
But we also really wanted to give Elayne's section proper respect, and trying to rush through it or get through it at the end of a 2-hour recording, we just knew we couldn't do it justice because there's a lot of good stuff in there, despite certain lines that we will be shredding up one side and down the other.
Do they have to be naked? Okay.
Moving on. 3 lanterns cast a flickering light, more than enough to illuminate the small room with its stark white walls and ceiling. But Ciane kept her eyes fixed on the heavy wooden door. Illogical, she knew. Foolish in a sitter for the white. The weave of saidar she had pushed around the jamb brought her occasional whispers of distant footsteps in the warren of hallways outside. Whispers that faded away almost as soon as heard. A simple thing learned from a friend in her long-ago novice days. But she would have warning long before anyone came near. Few people came down as deep as the second basement, anyway. Her weave picked up the far-off chittering of rats. Light. How long since there had been rats in Tar Valon, in the tower itself? Were any of them spies for the Dark One? She wet her lips uneasily. Logic counted for nothing in this. True, if illogical. She wanted to laugh. With an effort, she crept back from the brink of hysteria. Think of something besides rats. Something besides... A muffled squeal rose in the room behind her, faltered into muted whimpering. She tried to stop up her ears. Concentrate! Just dropping us right back into that scene.
So this is the group of people that started with Pavara and Siain who have grown to include a few other channelers who are searching for the Black Aja, and they are currently questioning Talene.
Their first real suspect that has actually gotten taken to the point of this. You know, like they got the ferrets earlier when it was just the two of them.
And now they got the rats.
But now they've got the rats.
And it does sort of, she talks about rats in the tower, and then you hear this muffled squeal. And like, oh, is it a rat squealing? And you're like, no, it's Elayne, who is kind of a rat, right? She is kind of a representative of the Dark One. There's a bit of an analogy there that like, oh, there's rats, there's actual Black Aja in the tower. Now they've been there the whole time, but she didn't know that.
Right. This is the moment when she can't avoid noticing that they're there.
Mm-hmm. She's hearing it squeal. I noticed that Siain has the sort of listening trick that Moiraine has, that she learned. And now she's been in Aes Sedai for 106 years, so she knew this long before Moiraine ever came along. And then we saw that from Varen's POV, where most novices either get a little bit of compulsion or a little bit of spying. Those are the two tricks. Is there a third one? Did I miss?
No, it's to do with listening or to do with convincing people to do so, which has a lot to do with memory and impulse control. There's a lot in the compulsion where it can go. But yeah, there's the two main schools of thought. Yeah, clearly Moiraine and her have nothing to do with each other in this reference.
Right. Logic counted for nothingness. True, if illogical. Typical.
I love that line.
Great line from a white, right? The understanding that not everything follows logic, especially when it comes to people.
Yeah, I mean, particularly yourself. Like so I'm reading this book called Why Buddhism is True, like the science and philosophy of meditation and enlightenment. It's by Robert White. And I just started reading it. He talks about how like illuminating the fallacies of your mind is not really the end of the process, because then you're just stuck with the ennui of knowing why you're doing the stupid thing and still doing it. There's no way out, just revealing that it's a dumb trick your brain is doing to you with impulse control or whatever. Like, that's not enough. Knowing that you're doing it doesn't actually solve why you do it. And that's very much what she's exemplifying here.
The next paragraph, she goes into talking about how the heads of the Ajas seem to be meeting in secret. You got Ferine, Jesse, and Suwana. These are all sort of powerful sitters who arranged for other sitters to be sent, the two young sitters to be sent off to the Rebel Tower. And we're trying to sort of create a situation where when the towers came back together, they could take back over, right? This is the same thing that Suwan noticed, the problem with the two young sitters. These are the people who created that problem to begin with.
Yeah, we got very confused trying to sort it out last book, and spoilers, it's not going to get any better.
Because a lot of these sitters are mentioned over and over again, but just in groups of other sitters, which makes it very hard to pick them out as individuals.
Yeah, it's just this line here. The tower was a seething swamp these days, every Aja at every other Aja's throat, yet the heads met in corners. It's like, yes, this is confusing to literally everybody except like RJ and Maria, I'm assuming. They understand. I don't think anybody else knows what's going on.
I'll be honest, I think RJ was confused about it as well. I think he...
Probably.
Just the way this reads, I'm not sure he knew what was going on entirely. He's like, oh yeah, I created that whole mess, didn't I? Ah, crap, I should probably mention that again.
Yeah.
And, again, thank you for Siain talking about Serene this whole time. So, again, we have Siain and Serene in the same room again.
Yeah, Siain and Saren, it's just like, stop.
Siain, for some reason, her name starts with C, and she works with Pavara, and Pavara is with Andral, and Andral likes to sail the seas. Somehow that's how I'm bringing that together.
Yeah, their names literally start S-E-A or S-A-E. It literally. It's not fair.
But we have two items of power in this room. We've got the Oath Rod, and then we have the Chair of Remorse. And this is really the first time, I think this is where we get the detailed description of the Chair of Remorse and how it works.
Yes. This is, I think, the only time that it comes up for more than a half a sentence mention.
More than it's like, oh yeah, we use that on criminals type situation.
Yeah. It gets mentioned like 3 times in the whole books. This is the only time it gets mentioned in any detail. It's a very fascinating artifact. And then the other object is obviously the Oath Rod, because, that's the whole point of what they're doing down here.
and the reason that Varen ends up suiciding, right? Because they have the oath. She wants to do essentially what Talene does here, which is forswear all her oaths and reswear the 3 oaths, so she doesn't have to kill herself. But it's not there, and so her only other choice is to suicide.
Yep, exactly.
I think there's a debate that can be made as to whether or not the oaths of the Dark One would let you forswear the oaths of the Dark One.
Talene does it.
She does it. Obviously it's possible, but that's one of those things where I'm like, would that be possible, or is that betraying the Dark One?
It's how deep into your logic can the oath extend? That's the question: is how far into your chain of reasoning can the oath reasonably apply? But
I'd be willing to bet that there's some Dark Ones who literally could not forswear the oaths just because of the way they were logically in their head.
Sure. I think Varen would have easily logicked her way around it because she's Varen. But I think you're right that it would come down to belief and personality, how that would play out. And the other Aes Sedai that are here also include Yukiri, who's the little tiny one, and then Doasin, who is the only person who can use the chair. Mm-hmm. So they're also here creating noise and conversation. Even though they aren't the decision makers, they're still creating stuff in the scene.
Oh, someone's asking if healing's one of the 3.
I mean, it isn't canonically described as such in the books, but that's a really solid argument that healing is the 3rd talent, right? Because village wisdoms are like a critical part of infrastructure in terms of their social structure. Like they just exist everywhere. So that's a really solid argument.
Yeah, and we've seen a couple of people besides Nynaeve, like some of the wise women have definitely acquired those skills through being wilders. So yeah, I could see an argument for that. I think that because it's so complicated, it's very much discouraged from being one of those talents, and people they don't really see it as like one of those little tricks. It's like, oh my god, it's this huge thing that only a couple of people can do.
Yeah, which is probably more about Aes Sedai bias than about reality.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, I never thought of that, but I like that.
So, the Chair of Remorse. They're using it as this torture device. I'm convinced it's a desktop gaming machine.
You think it's a game console?
I think it's a game console.
It's a VR game console.
It's a VR game console, right? Because the way it's a solid block with a soft top, so it's like a gaming chair, right? With a soft top, so it's super comfortable. Okay. And then it has this palm-sized notch with little palm-sized hole with notches in the side. That's where you insert your cartridge, right?
Okay.
And so what Doasin is doing is she's like actually like manipulating the bits with. She's channeling power into it and creating this sort of feedback loop in your own head that creates this sort of nightmare scenario, right, of your own guilt and torture and stuff like that. But that's not how it's intended to be used. How it's intended to be used is you get essentially it's like hooking raw electricity up to the Game Boy console, right? And so that's like, it's not good. She's like, I wonder how this is used. Well, I'm guessing there's inserts that go in that have sort of pre-programmed worlds, pre-programmed fantasies on them. You sit in the chair and all of a sudden you're in that VR fantasy world that you basically inserted into that opening, right? I think that opening is where the game cartridge goes. We just don't have any game cartridges. They've never found any of those.
That makes so much sense. You could even have it be like a therapy tool. You know, someone like in Grandal's profession, the Age of Legends, could like program a cartridge for someone's particular needs and be like, all right,
exactly.
Go get your therapy with this thing that I created for you that will help you get through your process. always had a hard time imagining what this could have been, what it even looks like. And you're saying that, and the whole thing is making so much more sense in my head. Is there any evidence for this, or is this just your idea?
No, this is entirely headcanon for me.
Oh my God. No, I am signing on. Headcanon accepted, locked, loaded, pinned in my brain forever. This makes so much sense. I love the idea that they're hot wiring it through the port instead of using the like pre-programmed safety buffered like hologram programs that was supposed to go in. I love that.
Or maybe like a Total Recall situation, like Schwarzenegger goes to Mars and like has this whole virtual reality adventure. If you haven't seen Total Recall, that won't make any sense to you, but that's, yeah.
But like Matrix beds or whatever.
Yeah,
like there's a million sci-fi examples that it's like, oh yeah, with just a few aesthetic tweaks, that's what RJ's describing. I get it now. I love that.
And they all have something to support you and keep you in place so that when you're thrashing about, it doesn't let you go. And this has that like soft top that like holds you in your spot. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm, because it's like the holodeck in Star Trek. Like you can walk miles while not walking anywhere because that's just how the technology magic works.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Because you're not actually walking, because it's just changing the world.
You think you're walking, believably. You can run around, but like you're not. And oh, that makes so much sense. And it just makes it visually make more sense in my head. It's not like a slightly slanted block, like at like a 3-degree angle. It's like really slanted because you're resting back in it in more of a recline. It's got quite a steep angle. Mm-hmm. Oh, that's so trippy. But where's the corporate branding? That's the problem with your theory, is there's no logo stamped on the side.
It's on the cartridges.
Oh, right. Yeah. And Elayne is being put through the nightmare version of this.
Yes.
Right. That's what the Aes Sedai have learned how to use it for. And that is very much what they're doing to Elayne, who is unnecessarily undressed, but whatever.
She's in her shift. We can talk about why, But again, if you look at it, a VR console, a lot of people do strip down to just like their underwear before they get in the VR thing to help with like sensory input and stuff like that. And I think that the torture comes from her own mind, right? This thing's creating a feedback loop, because they talk about how a criminal, a strong arm is broken by his own guilt, if nothing else, after 2, right? This whole, like, it's their own guilt that's creating the world that's causing the pain. And that's why she's being tortured by Trollocs, because she's a dark friend.
Right, yeah. And the other line is, they experience carefully selected consequences of their crimes. So there's a level of control, but I think you're right. It's like they throw these seeds in, and then all you have to do is maintain the waves while their own mind runs with it. I mean, it's riffing off of Figs and Mice, right?
Yes.
It's basically riffing off of that. It's that, but like you're peaking on acid in a VR isolation chamber. And so you are absolutely susceptible to whatever seeds get dropped into your head, and you're going to spiral out with them. And all they have to do is keep putting power in, and like, I mean, she obviously tweaks it a little bit, right? Like, going to the cookpot versus going to the murder. Like, she can drive basic decisions. Sure. But Elayne, I think, is doing a lot of the detail filling in.
Right. Doasine's not creating the Trolloc. She's not designing the Fade. She's not deciding which torture is available. She's doing none of that. That's all down to a guilty conscience.
Right. She's saying, you're being tortured by Trollocs. And then Elayne's figuring out what that looks like, because she's a dark friend. She knows what that looks like.
Right. Elayne is agreeing with no warder, which is sus, right? Like, the fact that she's agreeing with no warder should have been suspicious from the beginning, right? Like, and I can see where maybe there's some who don't, but she didn't get one because she's looking for a dark friend warder, and that's hard to find.
Right. Greens have a reputation for taking a while to get there first, and they can be very picky when they're between warders, but to just categorically not have one is not normal.
Not normal for Greens.
And Elayne's been an Aes Sedai for a while, like decades, right? She's like, is she accepted with Moiraine and Swan? She's accepted in New Spring.
She's a sitter.
Oh, so she probably was an Aes Sedai in New Spring then.
Let's see. She's 160 years old, so she's quite a bit older than Moiraine and those folks. She's actually like the same age as Siain, so she's quite a bit older. And being a sitter, I would expect her to be quite a bit older. So being 160 years old and not having a warder. Yeah,
especially as a sitter who's like, she's got time to find one.
Yeah.
So that's super suspicious.
She's in the tower. She's got plenty of time to like meet up with those folks. Like, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a little bit of the price was worth paying, right? You do what you have to do and you pay the price after. There's a bit of Aiel overlap there. Just basically like, hey, we know we're going to get in trouble if she's not black, but the price is worth paying, right? Like, we need to make sure that we're hunting down the black, and we need to do it safely, or else we're going to die.
And they're thinking, and Ciane's thinking, like, even if they're right, they might still get birched and stripped of their offices and maybe even stilled, because Tower law seldom allows for necessity. Like, you will still pay the price. And if you're right, it's worth paying. And if you're wrong, then whoopsie.
Yeah, it's kind of like breaking the Geneva Convention. It's like, I don't care if they're war criminals. You can't break the Geneva Convention by torturing them, right? And that's essentially what they're doing, is they're torturing an inmate of the White Tower.
Yeah, and it's like there have to be consequences no matter what the so-called greater good is. Otherwise, it's a slippery slope to, complete anarchy. Right. So goes the argument.
So, now, whether I believe that or not, she tried to stab them. Yeah.
Yeah, that is what Yukiri and Ciane and Pivara are kind of all creating through their conversation, is that situation. And it's funny because, It's a discussion that doesn't need to happen. It's there for exposition purposes because it's the opening of the new book. But Sarah still ends up not letting the fourth wall get broken too hard and calls down Yukiri, being like, stop rehashing this. We're already committed. Stop worrying. And also, Pivara, stop being a bitch to one of the only women in the tower that you can actually trust. Like, everyone calm down. We're just doing a war crime and I'm in charge. I like her. She's a bulldog, but she's cool. Yeah. Yeah. Saren. She gets shit done, which is more than I can say for most Aes Sedai.
There's a little interesting tidbit about ranking here. She'd been both a novice and accepted twice as long as most of them, but 40 years as a sitter, longer than anyone else in the hall, counted for a great deal. So even though she's not necessarily, didn't get through school the fastest, she's had authority for such a long time that people still have to do what she says. Which, again, there's just so much complication when it comes to who rules over who in the White Tower. And this is just sort of another piece of that puzzle. Of, being a sitter is really, one of the few ways that someone who's weak and has not had a great history can then gain rank is by being a sitter.
It's one of the few parts of their hierarchy ranking system that's actually a meritocracy.
Right.
It's one of the few things where your actual choices on your career path affect where you rank. Most of it is out of your control, but that is not.
Most of it's how long were you a novice, how long you accepted, and how powerful you are. But how powerful you are affects how long you're a novice and accepted. So it's all basically back down to power. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So they bring her awake and make her forswear the 3 oaths and swear the new ones. Forswearing the 3 oaths is incredibly painful. And in a way where it doesn't feel like it's just stacked, it feels like it's exponential pain.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's kind of incredible that she's able to do this, because she clearly knows what's coming next.
Right.
So the fact that she's able to do this suggests, there's a lot of flexibility in how the Don't Betray the Dark One oaths are interpreted. But yeah, she's given up. She is going to be in an eternal loop of being about to die, or she gives up. There is no choice at that point.
And I have to assume that the Black Aja has already once forsaken the 3 oaths and already experienced that pain once, right? I'm imagining because they have to swear the 3 oaths, and I imagine that then there's another ceremony where they unswear the 3 oaths and swear the 3 oaths to the Dark One, right? Mm-hmm. Because, and again, most Black Aja aren't black when they swear the 3 oaths. They're approached after they've sworn the 3 oaths, and then there's a ceremony where they're indoctrinated into the black, but they have to then forswear the 3 oaths that they swore on their raising to Aes Sedai. So I'm assuming she's gone through this at least once before.
Oh, yeah.
Which is why she's so oh my God, I don't want to do this, but I will forswear all 3 oaths and pay for it. Yeah.
Yeah. I hadn't thought about that. She knows exactly how bad it's going to be. Mm-hmm. So yeah, she has a little seizure and gets no respite because Pivara's a badass and is right away, swear the 3 oaths. She does, and then basically without resistance swears the 4th oath to obey all of them absolutely, and then she just waits for the hammer to drop, which it promptly does on everyone.
Yeah. our first, in quotes, reveal of a Black Aja. I mean, like, obviously the internally dialogue, we've heard a lot of people claim to be Black Aja. We know Alviarin's black, like all this kind of stuff. But this is the first time where
Leandrin, the 13 that left. The 13 that left, we've known they're Black Aja. We've seen them be Black Aja. Like, that's been clear. But this is the first time that we have one unveiled before she chooses to unveil, basically.
Only Saren and Pavara appeared at ease, because those, I think, are the only two who were already 100% convinced that there was Black Aja in the tower.
Agree. Yeah.
Everyone else still thought it might be, maybe not. Like, but
those two are the most clear-eyed about what they're doing. Yeah.
Then they talk about reporting to Elayne, and Elayne says, when you do that, we are all dead. Elayne is Black Aja. Because
Alviarin is Black Aja.
Yes, and she's all of her justification for why she thinks Elayne is Black Aja applies if her keeper is black and is doing all the reporting and setting all the rules. And like we've seen that relationship where Alviarin is making Elayne do things, and that's why the black knows about policies that are going to come out weeks, if not months, before they happen, because they're the ones setting the policies through Alviarin.
Exactly. And Elayne is working from incomplete information and drawing a very reasonable conclusion. The Amerlin's office is being run by a dark friend.
Yes.
But there's two women, and she's zeroed in on the wrong one. Because Alviarin is uber sneaky, because she's the head of the Black Aja, which means that not every Black Sister knows who she is, because that's what the Black Aja organizes. Elayne has no idea. She just assumes that it's Elayne. And then that puts the kibosh on these women going to Elayne with their results. Now they're rogue agents. Right now they thought they were on a mission, and now they're rogue agents, turns out. They've gotten roped into this whole other conspiracy of rogue agent sitters, and they have to figure out what to do with that. It really is a plot twist for what they thought they were doing.
And sort of, we don't tell Elayne anything until we can cripple the black at one blow. And it's like, you have no idea how big the black is. You think it's going to be another, like, 20 sisters. And it's like, no, it's
a third of all Aes Sedai.
you have to do a lifetime of work to figure out who all the black sisters are. This is not something you can just figure out. You know, Doacine seemed to be suggesting they kidnap every sister in the tower and force them all to take the added oath. And it's like, yeah,
that would have been a good idea.
That's the only way that you're going to do it. Everyone else ignores her because, like, that's ridiculous. And it's like, no, that is the only way you're going to be able to cripple the Black Aja at one blow. It's
either that or get Varen to hand you a book.
Or Varen's going to hand you a book, yeah. Then you do a lifetime of work and spying and stuff like that. No, in a lot of ways, I respect what they're doing, but it's too little too late. You know, you're trimming the branches of a tree that has wound its poisonous roots throughout the entire tower.
Right. You're treating the latest coup like it came out of nowhere rather than out of decades of very careful planning and
centuries.
Plotting. Yeah.
A Band-Aid on a sucking chest wound.
Yes. Very much so.
Yeah.
And you can't blame them for trying.
Right.
But also, like, you should have noticed this in the preceding centuries and done something about it. Not an analogy for America.
What? No. I love living through an empire as it falls.
Yes.
Academic.
Because ignoring history is super legit. Very, very useful way to move forward.
We get a little bit about the rebels and how they're going to make the rebels take the oaths. I really wish that they'd done more to integrate those two groups, because I really do think they brought all the rebels in, they make them swear the oaths, and they can trust them because none of them are dark friends. And they can figure that out. And, like, I would like to see them expand the group and work with them as opposed to make them swear. It's a relief when Egwene makes them give up the fourth oath, but I wish they'd come to that themselves a little bit sooner. It would have been nice to see that sort of progression as characters.
Yeah, it's the Aes Sedai not growing. It's the Aes Sedai being arrogant and close-minded and hierarchical. And if they had reached out to these young women who are willing to put themselves in the lion's den in an effort to do shit and been like, hey, sorry about the oath. It was a security measure. We're going to take it off and ask you to please be an asset in this, like, existential crisis we're trying to resolve. You think these women wouldn't say yes? They showed up because they genuinely thought the Red Aja was tearing the tower apart. You think that they won't be motivated to help with dealing with the Black Aja? Like, it's so... You women are so old and so mature. Why are you so childish?
They're sheltered. There's an ivory tower aspect, literally, to the White Tower. And I like the contrast. You've got the sitters and the head of Ajaz who sent sitters into the rebels to try and undermine them. And in the reverse, the Sheriam 6 sent the ferrets into the White Tower to try and undermine them. So you've got groups sending spies into each other's camps to try and undermine each other. It's all a giant clusterfuck and a mess that Egwene has to sort back out again. Yeah.
It reminds me of that one System of a Down song, breathing each other's lies, holding this in mind, that if we fall, we all fall. Every time I hear about a war of propaganda, I'm just like, that's what that song is about. Yeah. Every fucking time. It only clicked for me like last year, so it's still kind of a new revelation. But it's just, you could work together to save the world, but no, let's just all fight over who can be king of the ashes,
United we stand, divided we fall. I mean, that the whole White Tower plot line is basically talking about how they're a divided tower, and the Black Ajah and the Forsaken have designed them to be divided so that they will fall, so that they're not an effective force in the last battle.
I am minded of all the things we're learning with the January 6th hearings. It's really hard to not see it spelled out in exacting detail on this page.
Yep.
Yeah, it's and Saren, to bring it back, Saren's like, well, Elyda's a fool, and more than once I've regretted standing for her, but she's not really Black Ajah. And it's like, you voted for the leopards eating people's faces party.
Yeah.
That's who you are. That's your position in this ecosystem of analogies.
I mean, this is literally Elyda saying, hang Alviarin. That's how this whole thing started.
Literally. It is. And then this is Liz Cheney being like, well, I was into this right up until that point, and then it was too much, and now I'm a paragon of virtue and have never done a thing wrong in my life. Yeah, that's I mean, I like Saren for how she's an effective Aes Sedai, but she's, as someone who stood for Elyda, she's kind of the Liz Cheney of this analogy.
And that's the problem with all of these Aes Sedai. They all stood for Elyda. They all stayed with Elyda.
The only one who didn't was Ciane. That was part of why Elyda went to her, was because she's the only one who didn't. Everyone else did.
But she stayed.
She stayed.
Yeah.
Yes. But literally everybody else actively engaged with the coup. Yeah. Literally everyone else has that level of culpability on their hands. Ciane is the only one who can be like, well, all I did was not leave. Which is still pretty spineless and shady. But yeah, everyone else has not even that thin veil of an excuse to stand on.
And with that revelation, Ciane vomits.
Yeah. She does the only thing logical, which is to allow her body to have a meltdown. Which, I mean, mood. We are both anxious people. Yes, correct. That is the logical response.
But again, I love the white having the emotional response, right? She's the logical one, but she has the emotional response, right?
Right. She has, and just before that, she's having this like, how dare Saren try to keep me safe? How can Saren keep me safe? Right. Like, she's having this like whole turmoil, and it concludes with like, we just need some physical release. We just need to evacuate some energy. And yeah, and then she is basically kept under lock and key until she gets really frustrated with it and is like escaping Saren. Right at this point, she's like, "How can Saren keep me safe?" And then later, by the time Egwene's in the tower, she's like escaping because she hates being kept safe and all of that. So, Elayne. In Caemlyn.
She is in Caemlyn. So, the last time we saw Elayne, she had traveled to Caemlyn and basically walked into the throne room in a humble way, because doing it in pomp and circumstance has a history of having bad effects. And she had that whole conversation with Dylan, where Dylan was like, "You claim the throne?" And she's like, "Well, I'm not taking it from Rand. I'm claiming it on my own." She's like, "Then you got my support." And so that's sort of the key aspect of where she was last time we saw her. And now we're seeing some time has passed. She's
just a few days.
So sometime. Yeah.
Somewhere in here it says like her formal claim for the Lion Throne was only a few days old. So it's not been very long since that conversation, but we have time jumped into the last time we saw her was the moment before her arc on this, her succession arc starts. And now we are a few days in. All right. This is the succession arc. Here we go.
And this is also a bit of a flashback because it's the day before the Path of Daggers chapter 29 when Taim went to Rand and talked about his visit to Elayne, right? So we've already seen Taim talk about this visit to Rand, right?
Right.
But this is when he actually goes and talks to Elayne and sees her.
Yes.
So we've seen Taim in the future.
We've been over this moment in the timeline before.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're jumping back a little bit, and we're also doing a bit of recap, obviously, because it's the beginning of a book. So we're getting Nynaeve and Vandene both get an explanation about where they're at and what they're doing. Nynaeve is up to her neck planning with Rianne and the rest of the Knitting Circle how to spirit kinswomen out of Shan-Chan-controlled lands before they are discovered and collared. So that's a whole huge thing that, like, we see a trickle of kinswomen come into the plot, and Elayne uses them and sets up the idea that she's going to be a hub for the kin now that Ebu Dar isn't available. This is the very, very beginning of that, in a way. And then Vandene is doing the grief-stricken gumshoe detective thing and hasn't yet picked up the two old novices, right? Those two haven't attached themselves to her yet. Or have they?
Which novices?
The kinswomen that turned themselves in to her.
They've already turned themselves in.
No, they turned themselves in, but they haven't joined her gumshoe detective agency.
I don't think so, no. I think she's just on her own. Like, she's not eating. She's wandering around the halls, trying to find Serene?
Yes.
Carienne? Whatever.
Yes, the murderer.
The murderer. Who is mentioned a little bit later as one of the two Aes Sedai who can, like, assist the sea folk in learning.
Yes, and I was given a mnemonic to remember which one is the black sister.
Yeah. Okay.
The S name is the good one. There's so many S names that are Aes Sedai that are not Black Aja. The C name is the bad one, but the S name is fine.
The C name is a C name?
Basically, yeah. I was more of the way that my brain...
is a C word.
Yes. My brain latched onto it because of Somebody's Opinions parody song about all the S names, the S number 5.
Yeah.
And so when this person, I forget who, I think it was Super Skylake, said it's the S name is the good one of the two, I was like, because of that awesome song that Bodhi did. Thank you, Bodhi. You have now helped me keep straight which of these two fucking Aes Sedai is the Black Aja one.
I just looked it up every damn time.
Yeah, no, I now have a mnemonic. The one with an S is cool. Because most of the Aes Sedai with S names are cool. I mean, as Aes Sedai go.
One line I thought particularly interesting: if she had her way, Nynaeve Almira was going to be the Aes Sedai advisor to the next queen of Andor.
Yeah, that's not going to happen. Because she's going to be the Aes Sedai queen of Malkir. She will not want to be second fiddle to you, Elayne. Yeah. Sorry.
She's got her own kingdom, turns out. The Blight's going to retreat, and she's founding a whole dynasty of people. Yeah.
Yeah, she's going to spend the next 50 years making little warrior mage babies with Lan. Like, yeah, no, she's got way bigger fish to fry than Andoran politics.
If we're the last two Malkier, I guess we have to repopulate the whole country, is what she said.
Something like that.
Yeah,
it's a bit of an exaggeration.
Yeah.
I mean, first of all, she's not even genetically Malkieri, so but there's a lot of other Malkier young people that are going to help in the mission.
It was always interesting to me. For some reason, I was convinced that Lan was the last pure-blooded Malkieri.
Yeah, pure-blooded Malkieri royalty. Because the royalty and the nobility is the most important bloodline. There's still Malkieri refugees that haven't died or had kids with other Malkieri refugees. Like, it's not like he's like an elf that's like outlived his people. He's not a Time Lord, Because
there's that one Malkieri that asks him to, let him wear the Hadori because he's had no one else to ask.
Right, because his parents died I think, or at least his parents have been dead for a long time. I don't know if they died in the fall or whatever, but...
Bulin.
Yeah, no, there's definitely very few, but I think that there are still some... it's just the fall of Malkier wasn't that long ago. There are still some people who are full-blooded Malkieri, whatever that means, and certainly a huge amount of people who identify as Malkieri and who are only one generation removed from being fully Malkieri.
But, there's a lot of crossbreeding in the Borderlanders. There's, a lot of Borderlanders
Yeah,
who are,
what is pure,
right, yeah.
Anyway? There's traders, there's marriage alliances, there's people who want to move to a different fucking town because, I don't know, people don't always want to live and die in the same town. It's much more of a cultural thing, really. And there's a shit ton of cultural Malkieri who will absolutely show up and start popping out mage warrior babies with Nynaeve to take back Malkier.
I'm not religiously Malkieri. I'm culturally Malkieri.
As a person whose relationship to Judaism is literally that. Yes.
So Elayne has 13 armchairs. Don't know why it's 13, other than Robert Jordan loves that number.
It's a good number. It's my favorite.
It's a good number. Yeah, go for it. A little bit sort of about her situation. She's got some armsmen on their way from her estate, but I mean... One, I don't know why she didn't just gateway to her estate to pick them up, first of all.
Too busy?
Yeah, okay, whatever. Get your armsmen. It's the most important thing you can do. So they're traveling through the snow, so they're going to take a while before they show up. So all the Saldeans, Bashir's Saldeans, they're leaving. So there's, and there's actually a little bit, she talks about how crime is skyrocketing, and I have a little bit of an issue with that, where I'm like, just because there's no police doesn't mean crime's going to automatically go back up again.
Well, I have a theory.
Okay.
I think that it's Cheyenne and Mellar and Dark Friendery, because later on there's all those arsons that are super sus. I see the spike in crime here as being part of that, a precursor to that. And Cheyenne in particular setting up the situation in which Mellar becomes close to Elayne. Having a high crime rate, which is easy when you have dark friends, helps strain her resources and make her people more on edge and make her hold on power more tenuous. She has to bring in mercenaries. I have always seen that as a dark friend thing rather than a police are necessary to reduce crime thing. But I'd also never thought about the police reduce crime angle that he's making there. I'd never actually noticed that, and now I don't like it.
I'm also thinking it could be a lot of Gabriel's toadies who are still sticking around that didn't quite get purged, right? There's, now that Rand's not around, they're sort of poking their heads back up and being like, ooh, I can do a crime. Also
lingering resentments from what happened in that time, right? There could be just the ripples of people just aren't quite as settled. Maybe there's grudges that are being settled that got started because of Gabriel's influence. You need to do a quick murder to wrap up that plot,
So she's expanding her force. She's got a little bit of money to cover it. Later we see she gets a bunch of, silver mines are discovered on her... Aluminum mines are discovered on her estate. And so she's able to, all of a sudden she's way richer than she thought she was. So she's like, oh, I got this, no problem.
Yeah. Oh, and I also figured out why she doesn't get her armsmen. It's because they're all on the road. They're not at the estates. They're all coming from her estates. She talks about it much later. She wants to go out and get them, but it would require jumping every mile down the road by gateway because she has no idea where they are at between the estate and Andor, because the more loyal they are, the quicker they set out.
Right.
And that's how, what's his name, who's going to be her third warder, shows up. He's the one that shows up with a shit ton.
Her third warder?
Yeah, she's giving him all this kind of side eye and thinking that he'd probably make a good warder, and he's definitely gonna be her third warder at some point.
That went over my head entirely.
Oh yeah, no, she thinks about him at one point in that way, because she's a green. But yeah, he's young, he's pretty, he's competent, he's loyal, he's respectful. He's a non-creepy version of Talonvor. But he shows up as an under lieutenant, and then she immediately promotes him to Brigida's second in command because she shows up with a bunch of armsmen. But it's when she's thinking about all of this travel nonsense, and that's why she can't gateway out to get them. Mm-hmm. But I'm absolutely spacing his name, and I will think of it at 2 a.m. probably. Anyone in chat wants to figure it out?
Keith, I'm depending on you. He's on it.
It's not Javi and Nurella. It's not Galien. All right, now this is just going to bother me. Charles Guybon.
Guybon.
That's it. Charles Guybon. Charles Guy Hunk.
His name is just basically good guy. Like literally guy, like Bond is good in French. Guy, good guy.
Yeah, he's a good guy.
Yeah.
He's Charlie good guy. His name's literally Charles. Like he's great. But Elayne thinks about him as being a good candidate, and she's agreeing. And then she loses Brigida, and Rand is clearly not going to really. She needs a warder. Like clearly, the guy who's in charge of her army. Like she's going to bond him. Like as soon as the dust settles from the last battle in the Fourth Age gets underway, like that guy's absolutely getting bonded.
Yeah, I mean, Rand is still technically her warder, but he's not much of a good warder for her. She
needs a warder for show purposes. She's a green queen. Like she needs a warder who looks pretty and directs her armies. Oh, and Charles means free man. So he's a free man and a good guy. Yeah. He has no encumbrances, no strings attached, no baggage. He's just a good, free, blank slate. He will look pretty and be effective on her arm. He's perfect. He's going to be her. He's going to be her Gareth Bryn, but he's absolutely not here yet, and that is completely beside the point.
Tangent. Dylan is here, and she has a large round silver pin worked with Teravin's owl and oak. So that's her symbol, an owl and an oak.
Basically, Elayne is having to convince both Dylan and Brigida that they need to hire mercenaries to bolster her army. And she's like, I can afford it if something magical happens before I run out of money. And the two women who cannot agree with each other on anything, Dylan and Brigida are too alike, I think, to ever agree on anything. Right. And they agree on this, that this is a bad idea. And Elaine's like, in that case, I'm definitely doing it. Because that is how RJ has his characters make important decisions, I guess.
Well, and again, it feels like this is a little bit of a Ta'Veren twisting thing of like, she needs the money, so the money's going to show up. And she takes that on faith.
Yeah. But I mean, there's a certain amount of like, you can't always know everything before you start. And she's just doing a battle style gamble. Like, it'll work. Something will happen.
And a big portion of wisdom is going on anyway. You know,
right.
Like that's, yeah.
And someone pointed out to me the other day, this is an absolute tangent. Someone pointed out the other day that the breaking of the world would have brought a lot of mineral resources much closer to the surface and made them much easier to get to, especially after the extractive industries of the Age of Legends, like getting all the good stuff, that the breaking would have, in a sense, replenished a lot of deep earth materials. And I had never thought of that before. And I'm not sure to what extent I buy it, but it's fascinating. And the alum mine thing is just being like, how much of that is because of the breaking, which is because of LTT? So really, it's uber Ta'Veren. LTT put that there for Elayne to find.
Yeah.
In a sense.
Yeah, one of my favorite aspects of the show was when they showed the mining town, and what they were mining wasn't ores, but actual remnants of an old civilization and metals from the buildings and stuff like that. I thought that was a really cool idea of like, no, we've got these, you can actually like, these cities are underground and they've already done all the hard work of like mining materials. So all you have to do is dig those up instead.
Yeah, that was a really cool detail in the show. And it's also one of the plot devices in The Ear, the Eye, and the Arm. I know Fire Phoenix, who is here in chat, has read that because we've talked about it before. But one of the things in that is they're mining old dumps. It's an Afrofuturism young adult novel. And they're mining dumps for plastic and metal. And that's kind of the setting that the plot starts in. I remember that story so vividly. Of all the books I read as a kid, a few stand out, and that one just, the idea of mining a landfill for plastic, just, you know, I'm like 10 years old. I have a very small sense of the world, like, blew my fucking mind.
We're not that far away from that, honestly. Like, there's a point where, and not the too distant future, I think getting raw materials out of the earth is going to be harder than getting raw materials out of landfills.
Absolutely. Rare earth minerals, like for computers, that's already very true. And we're running out of computer grade sand. So we're going to need to learn how to recycle those things instead of throwing them away, because that sand is in remarkably small supply, actually.
And that's what I work with every day. Is I literally, my job imports the silicon wafers that are made out of that sand.
That we are actively running out of.
Actively running out of. So every time I fuck up and break a wafer in my job, I'm wasting that very rare sand. So my job is to make sure the machines that process that sand work.
You're literally saving a valuable and quite possibly very finite resource. Though I have read that runoff from Greenland might be giving us a new supply. The rate of runoff and the amount of powdered rocky granite sediment, there's so much silica in that, and it has no organic material in it. And it's a fairly new resource because it wasn't running off that hard until human-induced climate change. So there's not a lot of like ecology built around it. So maybe that will be a weird Ta'Veren twist for us. But I read one article about that several years ago. I have no idea like where that science has gone or not.
Me neither. Yeah. No, but it's amazing how resource constrained we are as someone who's trying to make computer chips, and how, a big part of what we're dealing with is supply line bottlenecks in the stuff we're trying to get to make the computer chips.
Yeah. And it's important to know, too, that rare earth minerals are not actually rare. It's just that they occur in such tiny amounts that it takes an incredible amount of effort to get enough to do anything with them. They are actually decently common, but it just in like the most minute amounts. Right.
They're in all the rocks, but not very high concentrations.
There are no veins of these things to be found. It's like, a few molecules here and there. And so if you crush up several tons of rock, you can get like a few ounces. And that's what makes them rare. Rare earth mineral mining is a thing that we should all be desperately striving to avoid with as much aggressive recycling and upcycling and refurbishing as we can possibly get away with.
Yeah. Well, and that's where we can talk about capitalism and how, when it's slightly cheaper to mine new materials than it is to recycle, all that recycling is going in the trash.
Yep.
So it's a matter of cost, and I don't know. I don't have a solution in my head of how we fix that problem.
There's a really cool organization in Eugene that's been around for like 20 years called Next Step Recycling, and their whole thing is collecting digital waste and processing it, and their model has like won some awards and been copied in a few other places, and we've got like Oregon has like tax credits or subsidies or whatever for e-waste recycling at places like Goodwill and like county waste station dumps where they are collecting it ostensibly to process it in its own way. But really, I think it has to be more grassroots and bottom up. We can't ever expect this to be a top-down fix. Like, we as people have to organize how we're going to deal with not throwing this shit away. And, at some point, we do have to get industry to participate.
I was going to say, isn't that what the government is for? Is basically the bottom-up people organizing that then regulates the big industries and forces them to do what is not profitable for them to do? And that's sort of the whole point of government, right?
When it isn't co-opted by a bunch of lizard people, that is ideally how it works. We should probably return to the chapter.
Let's return to the chapter. The next thing I have is a bit about Brigida and sort of how the water bond has affected the two of them. The way they're, as women, mirroring each other emotionally, which is not something that happens between men. And the way her courses have shifted.
Her courses, which is a weird turn of phrase.
Very weird turn of phrase.
Like, just be like a normal cringy person and say moon time. Jesus.
That's how it's addressed in most fantasy.
Exactly. Like, just like join in the collective cringe of the 90s, man. Come on. But whatever. This book was actually published in 2000, so I guess, he wanted to upgrade.
Yeah, he wrote it in the 90s, so...
Yes, yes. There's a bunch about Brigida's level ups that Elayne sort of forced on her. She has a title and an estate, and... Well, she's got title and she's got a rank. But yeah, she's got an estate, and her outfit is... She's got blue pants instead of yellow pants. She's leveled up.
And, like, white collars to represent the White Lion of Andor, like, stuff like that. Yeah. So, not that it's... ever really, if she dies before she gets a chance to like go to her estate ever.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely because it's all Elayne being a petty person in the way that Elayne knows best, which is to force rank and title on people who don't want it. Like, it's the one thing she can really do to Brigida, so she does it. And it's just petty.
But it is useful because she's making Brigida an important person in her rulership, and so she needs her to have rank and file. And even if it's just on paper, she needs her to have it so that people will call her Lady Brigida, and she'll have authority over all the stupid nobles who don't want to do what she wants them to do.
I wonder if part of Brigida's resistance to this is that it makes her life more real. It makes her more integrated into this life that she's not supposed to be in.
I thought she didn't want to be more public because she's trying to hide who she is.
Right, yeah, that's part of it. I mean,
kind of. Brigida is trying to hide, in quotes, who she is, but her name's Brigida and she carries a goddamn silver bow. You know, it's like...
yeah.
You're not hiding very well.
No.
You're hiding just as well as Obi-Wan Kenobi was hiding. You know, change your fucking last name!
Yeah. For sure.
It's like Brigida's hiding as Brigida.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's real sneaky.
Trahelian instead of Brigida Silverbow, you know?
Yeah, what does Trahelian even mean? Is there an explanation anywhere for what Trahelian means?
I thought it was just a Kandorian last name that she picked.
Oh, okay. So that makes sense.
Since she's supposed to be from Kandor, because she wants to wear the clothes of Kandor, and that's the closest they were able to, like, find.
I was going to say, I think that this is definitely a cosplay I would do, these bright blue trousers. I've never really liked her whole yellow trouser look, but like blue, that sounds pretty cool. I'm a sucker for blue. I love blue.
Yeah, earth colors, not that bright. No, I'm not shocked.
Sky blue isn't exactly an earth color by definition. But yeah, no, yellow is just too... I don't know. I don't like yellow very much. But yeah, the emotional mirroring between two women who are bonded is weird. I get the physiological thing, though, with having their periods sync up. Like, that to me does make a lot of sense.
Does it? Does it really?
I mean, it makes more sense than the emotional thing not applying to men.
Yeah, I think I guess the course is shifting with the magical bond, sure. Oh God, I'm using that terminology. But like, okay, I'm fairly convinced that that's not a thing that actually happens in real life. It's the phenomenon of the blinkers syncing up, right? Like, if you have two things at a regular period, eventually they're going to sync up, but then they're going to desync. It's
way too variable per woman to say that it's true or not. I think there's absolutely situations in which it does happen to women, like where they do sync up and like they're weird hippy dippy people living in each other's pockets in Eugene and they don't shut up about it to me. Like, it does happen, I think, but I think there's a lot more confirmation bias and that blinker syncing thing than most people give it credit for. I do think it happens because menstruation is such an incredibly complicated and impenetrable process that, like, there are no rules. There are none, which means that even weird Taviran shit can happen. But yeah, it's hard to prove. It's just hard to find people who won't swear that it has happened to them.
Right.
Never happened to me because my period is smoking crack. Always has been. But
so it's one of those things where I've read a bunch of articles and again, everyone's like, yes, I've known somebody who that happens to, but science can't prove it. Which to me is just a huge red flag for something that doesn't actually happen.
No. Science and women's health is a huge red flag.
Well, there is that too. Yes, that is a huge. You're right.
I will believe the collective experience of people more than a field that is historically horrible at understanding women's bodies.
And this is where I can't really make a claim one way or the other. That's what I've asked but I've also met a lot of women who are like, no, it doesn't happen. You know, it's female people. It's just like absolutely not.
Yeah. That's why I'm just like, there's no way to know. Like, there's no good way to know. People will swear by it, and it's more ambiguous than homeopathy. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, because homeopathy is not ambiguous.
That's my point.
So anyway, personal biases aside, I have them. Moving on.
It's fine. We all have them. So... what is next that's interesting? A little discussion about limitations of using the power. When Elayne heats the wine, she thinks about heating the room and how that's impractical because it wouldn't last, or she'd have to hold on to it for too long. Because we often give the Aes Sedai shit for not making light and heat with the power. And so this is one of the few paragraphs where RJ actually bothers to say, no, here's the mechanical reason why that's not happening. Even for a really powerful Aes Sedai like Elayne, this is not a feasible thing to do. So. And
Elayne seems to be struggling a little bit with the desire to pull more. She's in that danger zone area where she's wanting to channel more and more and more. So she's trying to be careful and not do that, even while she, reheats her wine. Although I do like it. She's like, reheating gave the spices a slight bitterness. And then later she takes a sip and nearly chokes on it because it's so damn bitter.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
She forgets, because now she's reheating it mostly so it's warm in her hands. Mm-hmm. And then it turns out that that's really bad for making wine taste good.
Yeah, but Elayne is a very impulse-driven, pleasure-seeking, self-centered person, right? Of course, she's struggling with the addictive, seductive nature of the power and using the power for this frivolous thing, like warming up her hands. Nothing against Elayne, that's just who she is, right? She is a spoiled princess who learns to think about others slowly and painfully. And, I think that it makes sense that extends to her relationship with the power.
I don't have a lot for the next, page or so. The Game of Houses has infected Andor since she left for Tarvalin. That's you've had Rand, you've had the Dragon Reborn, you've had a bunch of Kyrian nobles hang out. I feel like there's just, the Game of Houses is a thing now. She's
suspicious of Dylan, but we know that never pans out, so it's not really worth, no. That's just suspicion, whatever. Dylan's fine.
Loyal, yeah. If she wanted to be queen, she would have just taken the queenship from you, because she could have done that at any time.
Yeah, no, Dylan is only worried that she's made the wrong choice in backing Elayne, not that she's waiting to step in and save Elayne. That's absolutely not what's happening.
I think Dylan's worried because Dylan's supporting Elayne to avoid a secession war, and now she's like, wait, you're going to start a secession war? That's exactly the opposite reason I'm supporting you.
Right.
I don't want that to happen. So I think there's a little maybe uncertainty in Dylan's head if she's doing the right thing, but it's at this point, if Dylan straight up declared for queen, there would be a secession war anyway. So her best chance of avoiding that is still to keep supporting Elayne.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's this really ridiculous queen thing where Elaine's I'm trying to sit in the throne like a queen with my back straight and my free hand resting lightly on. It's just oh my god, go to drama club.
Yeah, with the hand wave to the side, is she there's a little bit of...
Yeah, I find her whole attitude towards her sacred duty to rule the people, and she has to look like a queen and be calm. I'm an anti-monarchist, so I find her faith in monarchy irritating.
Yeah, but at the same time, that's something that Rand had to learn, is that sometimes you need to look the part. He needed to dress up with a nice coat, he needed to have the fancy scepter, he needed to have the big throne. Those things are useful tools in making people see you as a ruler, especially when you're basically a kid.
Yeah.
And her sitting on the throne in a rumpy dress, slumped over, being oh yeah, give me some guards, sure, yeah. Okay, yeah, whatever, on her phone while she's ignoring Dylan. That's not gonna no, that's not a good look either.
Yeah, you're right. I just don't like being in the head of someone who's I have a sacred duty to be on top of this pyramid scheme of social control. I don't like being in the head of someone who believes that.
Oh, she's got a sacred duty to be on top of Rand.
True, though. Also, she's wearing skirts. She needs to get into her acrobat outfit before she can really pull off the properly arrogant leg over the arm of the chair.
Right, yes. Or skirts divided.
Right. Yes. They're not pants. But they're not pants.
Not pants. Oh my god. So I was listening to... Never is still listening through early Wheel of Time. So we were listening to The Shadow Rising last night. We're getting towards the end of that book. And so and then in the middle of the thing, it goes, and she was wearing divided skirts for blah, blah, blah. And Never busts out, they're not pants. And I was just like, yes, it's everywhere.
Yeah.
It's totally infected your brain.
Yeah, Tarvalon After Dark, they did 2 episodes of just all commercials. They did commercial anthologies for 2 weeks, and I happened to open up the second one just for funsies, and it started with the ad we did for Pans. So I got reminded of exactly how funny that was. It's just amazing.
TVAD is so good. If you're not listening to Tarvalon After Dark, like, I honestly think it's a better podcast than we're doing right now. Yeah, I mean, it's not as... It's funnier. It's like, they're so fucking funny, right? Like, they put so much effort. Yeah.
Oh my God. They're amazing. They are amazing. I love getting to edit the show and hear it before everyone else. It's really good stuff.
I think we're a better resource, but they're so funny. And like they put a lot of work into writing their skits and writing
it's an apples to oranges comparison. We're just not doing the same thing.
No, we're not doing the same thing. So I shouldn't say better than, but...
No, I know what you mean, though. They are really fucking entertaining.
Yeah,
really entertaining. I don't listen to our podcast except to edit. Well, I don't listen to their podcast except to edit, but I enjoy editing theirs more than I enjoy editing ours. That's not really fair.
I mean, you're listening to yourself, which is always troublesome.
Yeah, but it's everyone go listen to TVAD. They're officially neat.
Right. And obviously, like, Aradia and I have put a lot of work in, mostly Aradia now, but I also put a fair amount of work into editing that podcast. So there is a little bit of us in that podcast in terms of when some of the jokes land and how the editing is. And like, we do a fair amount to make sure those jokes get pulled off. Yeah.
And trimming out the background noise and the parts where they organize their stuff. Though I did leave a pretty messy section in because it was hilarious and they wanted it left in on this last one. And also these are some of the central people making WotCon happen. Just to circle back to the WotCon discussion. These are central figures to where WotCon started and where it's going.
And Jess had a lot to do with making SpoilerCon happen the first couple of years it happened. She put a lot of work into making.
Yeah. And Brian wrote the whole script for last year's trial.
Right. Yeah. No. So like, cross-pollination between the podcasts. We love each other.
Yeah. And that ad that I released on Patreon for everyone last week, that was an edited version of what Brian wrote for us, but that Brian wrote us that script, and that was where we started, and then we riffed on it, and I edited it down. Yeah. Lots of cross-pollination with those guys. They're wonderful.
So Elayne's feeling Brigida's embarrassment, and she fakes pretending that she's angry. She's like, I'm going to put on a stern face so no one can tell that I'm embarrassed, even though I'm not embarrassed because I'm feeling Brigida's emotions. There's a lot of weird emotional crossover going on right there.
Yeah, it's whatever. It's a funny physical comedy gimmick that RJ has prepared for us to enjoy for the rest of this arc, basically.
The next big chunk is when she really gets into the politics of the great houses. There's about 2 paragraphs here where she says that starts with, I have 3 declared challengers.
It's a lot of names.
And you said you kind of wanted to get in 2 of the more obscure ones and talk about them, because we're going to get into the bigger ones later.
I thought about it. Yeah, because there's a lot of names. So just to go through the sheer list of names we've got Aramilla, Nason, Nayon, Elenia, Jared, and then the houses of Baran and Anshar.
Luan, Elorian.
Those are the names that are here. It's a lot.
Uh-huh.
And I don't really know if there's anyone that's really worth talking about at this point, because we're going to get in with all of these nobles in smaller groups with more detail later. And there's nothing really like, this is just the exposition being like, remember, this is the cast of characters you have to memorize for this book. I couldn't really find anything that felt super relevant to bring up at this point.
I guess mostly talk about the numbers. 6 houses are arrayed against her. She has 2, and 3 have declared for Dylan, which are kind of also mean they've declared for her because Dylan's sworn to her, but not really. Because
Dylan won't declare for herself, so they're forced to. You assume that they'll go where she goes.
Right. So you sort of have a 5 to 6, kind of even split. It's not clear. There's like, what did she say, 27 or was it 19?
19.
There were 19. I don't know where I came up with 27. There's 19 houses, so that's only 11 out of the 19, which means there's 8 more out there that we're not even talking about that are basically either, there's some houses would stand aside from supporting her because of the outrages Gabriel had perpetrated in Morghase's name, and others because Rand has said he intended to give her the throne. So those other 8 are basically saying, yeah, we would support you, but your mother's a fucking terrible person, and we're not supporting a puppet of the Dragon Reborn.
Right. She has an uphill battle to convince people on multiple fronts that they should come join her versus the numerous other contenders that want that support instead.
So essentially you sort of have this 5 to 6 to 8 three-way split where, you know, a big group in the middle is uncommitted. 6 are against her, but not with each other necessarily. It's like a bunch of little groups who have splintered off. And then she probably has the most support of any individual group, but it's still not a lot of all the nobles.
Reminds me a lot of Egwene and the Hall.
Yeah.
It's a very similar kind of struggle in terms of things are balanced between 3 poles, and our heroine in the middle is going to have to play the game of houses really well to start shifting power to her pole away from the other 2.
Yeah, and Egwene has sort of distracted some of them with that whole, like, I'm coming into the edge of Andor, and 3 houses have ridden out to deal with her. Like, we talked about those 3. Yeah,
they're tied up in Mirandy for the moment, for the month that Egwene is there. But then when Egwene hops over to Tarvalin, then they're able to break camp and come back to Caemlyn and deal with Elayne.
Mm-hmm. But again, Snow is making all this happen very slowly, and time is passing we're not having a lot of time actually pass. So a lot of these nobles are just stuck, and it's like, yeah, things are uncertain, and we're dealing with that uncertainty because nobody is really able to travel and do politics very well.
Yeah. And then Elayne she's getting all this resistance, right? And then she puts it in these really stark terms that to her political enemies, this is a succession, right? Dylan's saying, well, it's not a succession. It's not a succession. Elayne's like, the people I'm fighting with see it as a succession, which means I need to treat it that way. And even if I don't, the Shan-Chan are an extremely good reason to get every person with 4 limbs a sharp, pointy stick and line them up because...
Let's not even mention the last battle. Right? Like, yeah. That's really, if we're talking about like what the Ta'Veren world is doing, the world is gathering for battle. Everybody is forming up armies. Everybody is gathering up everyone they can get. Everybody's training as many people as they can get. And whatever excuse they have, what's happening is these armies are building up for the last battle. Like, everybody kind of knows that, like, maybe I should learn how to use a pointy stick because there's going to be Trollocs coming for me, right? Like, nobody's really uncertain. I mean, some people, obviously are in denial, Elida. But, like, most people who are paying attention, we're not that far away from people looking up at the sky and being like, a storm is coming, and just, abandoning their farms and going off to fight the last battle.
Right. Well, or beating their plowshares into swords and then heading off. But yeah.
Not where I thought you were going when you said beating their... Yeah.
And then Brigida is so focused on her own problems that she distracts the whole conversation by being like, Gawain will fix everything! Right. And then Elaine's like, yes, Gawain will fix everything just as soon as he gets here. And it's like, both of you are so wrong. Gawain will fix nothing.
Gawain won't show up. Like, he's gonna be obsessed with Egwene and completely abandon his duty to Elayne. And it's one of the, like, I'm frustrated with his decision to support Elida in the White Tower, but it was a snap decision in the moment. You support what you think is the rightful elected ruler, even though it turns out they didn't win the popular vote. But, you think that they're the properly elected ruler, so you make a decision in the moment, right? This is abandoning his duty for someone who doesn't even want him around, right? Like, I hate the decision to stay with Egwene and not go to Elayne.
Yeah, Elayne fully expects him to show up. He completely betrays her trust and expectations. He betrays his oath to her. The only time he shows up is when he's having a fight with Egwene. And then he leaves Elayne the second that he decides that he's done having a fight with Egwene.
And so this comes back to my, like, I know a lot of people don't like this, but perhaps he was compelled to support the Amyrlin seat during the rebellion, right? We know like, he supports Elaida until the moment he learns that Egwene is the Amyrlin seat, and then he can go support her. I think he's compelled to support the Amyrlin seat no matter what, and he can't break away, and that's why he's unable to go to Elayne when he finds out that she's the queen. It's light compulsion. And but here's the thing, like, Morghese was able to break compulsion even when it was actively being done on her. He's such a weak-minded fool that he cannot break away from it, even many months later. It still makes him shitty. Yeah,
I see your argument, but I stand by he was just thinking with a small head.
Yeah.
I really think that that's just what happened. But there's an argument that can be made with your evidence. I'll grant you that.
Like, he's so dumb. Like, I just can't... I cannot believe that he's that dumb and makes that many poor decisions without some form of compulsion going in. And like, and we know that the splitting of the tower, I mean, we've got Denel, we've got Alviarin, we've got all these dark friends. One of them is going to make sure that there's a split among the borders. And how do you do that? You pick a leader among the kids and you make him support your new Amyrlin. With compulsion.
It would be smart. I will grant you that. That would be a very good twist to your plan.
So, it's entirely headcanon. I know that most people don't think that's true, and most people are just like, fuck Gawain and moving on with their lives. Fine.
Well, no, we aren't moving on. We are staying stuck on our hatred of Gawain forever.
But yeah, I mean, and a lot of people are pointing out, he's a very real character that makes poor decisions. Like, not everyone makes the right decision. He's just stuck because he doesn't know what to do.
It's hard to come to terms with people that make really dumb decisions, and you want to believe that there's some overarching excuse or some ulterior motive or some external force. And in the real world, we rarely get that catharsis, but sometimes we do. So it's fantasy. You can headcanon, and your mileage may vary.
Aram is the only other character who I think makes as many poor decisions as Gawain.
That is I could see bending them together in the Poor Decisions Club. Yeah.
Right. Just dudes who just don't get it, who are obsessed with revenge or whatever, their own personal stuff, and just make the wrong decisions for the wrong reasons.
They are both perplexing characters that spark endless debate about morality and free will. With or without compulsion, they still both spark those questions.
Seafolk?
Seafolk come marching on in barefoot despite the weather, because that is how they do. They have leathery feet that just don't need shoes.
Yeah. Ow. Snow. Walking around in snow with bare feet? I don't like...
Calluses are hell of insulators.
I guess, yeah. Yeah.
Sea hobbits. Yes, they have sea hobbit feet for sure. But yeah, it is Rhaenyra din Callan and Zaida din Parid. This is the sail mistress and the wave mistress and the
they're both channelers, aren't
Windfinder. No, Zaida is not a channeler.
Got it. Okay.
Rhaenyra is the most powerful channeler in Seafolk society, and Zaida is the most powerful woman in their political society, and she just looks down on her as if she's just a channeler. And there's like a whole like ego bumping against ego thing with them, because Seafolk have their whole complicated inner world that we barely ever see, except as it pertains to irritating our main characters. But yeah, they walk in, and it does not make Elayne happy. This is the last people Elayne wanted to see, basically. And she tries to get out of it, and they do not let her get out of having an audience.
Quick question. Does this sentence make sense to you? It's talking about Brigitte. She was always ginger around the Seafolk.
What doesn't make sense about that?
Shouldn't ginger be like... I just feel like the tense of that word is wrong.
Yeah. I mean, gingerly would be another way you could use it.
Yeah. I would think it would be like she always stepped gingerly around the Seafolk is how I would phrase it.
That would be
So using it as she would always ginger around, like that seems to me to be a weird way of using that word.
She was always ginger. It's describing her like as an adjective. Ginger is an adjective for her whole being.
Okay.
But yeah, the way you would write it would make maybe a little bit more literal sense.
Yeah, it that struck me as an odd phrasing of the word that was just weird to me. Okay, as long as it makes sense to everybody else.
I think it's just maybe a slightly clunky, but it's not totally wrong. And we also learn here at this point that Elayne has not publicized which tower she is aligned with, which is a political point of saliency she holds on to for a very long time. She doesn't come out in favor of either tower, I think, until it's over. I think she keeps that close to her chest the whole time.
But, I mean, which is a ridiculous... Like, we all know she's in favor of... Like, she's part of the Rebel Tower. She's... Egwene's her best friend. Like, she loves Rand, and that's, like... You know, she also hides what she feels about Rand for a long time, right?
Right. Well, and, like, her friendship with Egwene is not a matter of political saliency, right? Like, that has no currency, right? Nobody knows about their friendship. That has no relevance in terms of the people who give a shit about caring which side she's on. They're just like, eh. Eventually she does give the cold shoulder to Elaita's ambassador, but it's a slow process. She's very, very slow to reveal that.
Well, I mean, I think a lot of people don't even understand the division in the White Tower.
Exactly.
Right? A lot of people don't even think the White Tower is divided. They think it's a political ploy. Like, there's a lot of weirdness where, like, Aes Sedai are trying to do their best for a long time to hide the division in the White Tower. It's only recently that they've even acknowledged it's a thing, you know? So, with I think really declaring war on Elaita is the first time it becomes publicly known that there is a division. And that's why one of the reasons, like, that whole thing where she convinces the Hall to declare war on Elaita, she's like, listen, people just don't even think we're divided. They think we're just manipulating them. Like, we need to make an official declaration or else, like, we're going to be in trouble. And that only happened, you know, like a month ago.
Yeah. When was that? Because
last time we saw Egwene was when she gatewayed to the White Tower, right? And that was after a month of rest, and that month of rest was literally started the day that they declared war on Elaita.
Right, and we have not jumped back that far. We've only jumped back a few days. So yeah, it's the news has finally become common knowledge.
Right.
At long last.
And the way news travels, you know, if that was just a month ago, like, maybe people haven't even heard of that yet.
Mm-hmm. Also, I really like the fact that there's just this kaleidoscope hanging out as a prop in this whole scene. Like, it's such a random little thing.
Oh, I missed that. Where's that? Oh, four-barreled kaleidoscope. Yeah, there it is.
Yeah, Zaida is playing with it for like 2 pages. Like, as this conversation plays out, she keeps fiddling with this kaleidoscope over and over again. And it's just the most random prop to have. Like, RJ never talks about fidget spinners in any sense. You know, he never has people fiddling with rosary beads or playing with kaleidoscopes or blowing bubbles.
Elaita and her ivory fish.
Okay, Elaita and her ivory fish. One exception. But, like, this is just a random object just sitting in one of Elayne's rooms. Like, this isn't like she's obsessed with the kaleidoscopes and that's a big part of her arc. It's just this object sitting on the mantelpiece. And it's really cool because I don't know if anyone hasn't looked through a kaleidoscope recently, but they're really fucking cool. Kaleidoscopes are super dope. And I just love that Elayne has a really fancy one hanging out in one of her, like, most official rooms. She has a kaleidoscope on the sideboard. But
it doesn't, like, show you anything. It's just cool patterns and stuff, right? Like,
Yeah, it's just colored beads and mirrors that make really, really trippy patterns. But a 4-barreled kaleidoscope means there are a lot of different things to play with, right? Like, the more barrels or lenses you've got on it, the more combinations of cool shit you can look at, and the more fun it is. My dad had a really cool kaleidoscope when I was growing up. I'm quite fond of them.
But yeah, it's almost like a weird science museum type thing. Like,
yeah, like a prism or something. It's just a visual toy.
I feel like it's this, like, showing off wealth type situation, right? Like, kaleidoscopes would be something that only wealthy people could afford. Like, this is her way of basically being like, yes, I'm able to afford this, like, telescope, this, like, highly polished glass, highly polished mirrors. All of those things are hard to make.
And it's just for fun. It doesn't even do anything.
Right.
Yeah. It's probably got actual gems instead of colored glass, you know. Very fancy, very bougie.
So the whole issue with the Sea Folk is, as part of the bargain, in quotes, they were promised the Bowl of the Winds and 20 Aes Sedai teachers. And all they've gotten is Morel.
Yes, who is quite a changed woman at this point from being the only woman who's teaching them.
She's like, oh God, I'm in trouble.
Yeah, she is really, she doesn't have much of a personality in my mind until the sea folk have really traumatized her. And then she's just like flighty, like scared little bird. And that's really how I think of her, even though that only happens when she becomes the sea folk's plaything. And then she helps the sea folk novice Windfinder run away to the tower.
Right.
She gets that fed up with being their single teacher. But at this point, she hasn't been broken quite that far yet. At this point, she's just startled and traumatized.
And so the sea folk basically say, well, first of all, Elayne says, why don't you go to Tyr? There's all your other people are there. Why don't you get out of my fucking hair and go to Tyr and like hang out with the rest of the sea folk, and I'll send some Aes Sedai to you whenever I can. And they're like, no, you won't.
Yeah.
We are not. Yeah, no, you won't. We are staying here until we get our bargain. And saying, hey, there's 5 of you in the palace. Why are we only getting 1? Right? More of you should be dedicating your time to teaching us. And Elayne says, well, Nynaeve's not going to do it. Van Dien doesn't give a shit because she's like dealing with the death of her sister and like is going through major depression and isn't going to obey any orders. Elayne can't do it because she's queen and she's not spending her time teaching the sea folk. And that leaves Kareen and Saritha, who are her 2 dark friend suspects.
Right. One of them is the murderer.
Right.
It's either one of them or Morel, but Morel has been pretty much ruled out because she's in the state she's in with the sea folk. But yeah, it's either Cariana or Saritha, and we know, as I mentioned earlier, that Saritha's the good one because most of the S-name Aes Sedai are cool because Bodhi's song is about S-names, and it's a good song. It's a very complicated mnemonic, but it's stuck in my head forever. But yeah, so she's like, I think I can bully them into it a tiny bit, maybe slightly. And Morel is like, oh my God, that would be the most amazing thing ever. Please, 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 please.
And Zaid is like, it is agreed under the light. And Elaine's like, whoa,
Yeah.
wait, no, I said this is not a bargain. I just said I might try and push them towards you. Mm-hmm. Elayne blinked. That was ominous.
Yeah, it is.
Very, very ominous.
And then she gets a break from dealing with the sea folk when the door opens again. Yay!
Yeah. I swear to God, the whole point of this lead up is to pile as many people as possible into the throne room so that they can see her get naked.
Yeah, because RJ really wants the public humiliation of Elayne stripping naked in a room full of people to happen. And so he needs to pile a lot of people in the room first. It's a little heavy-handed how many people show up here.
Yeah.
Because it's an exposition-heavy prologue. Yay!
Right. So we're also getting, some recap and stuff like that. So Reena Harford, who is one of my favorite super minor characters, but she was great with Rand. She's the kind of person who's like, I run the palace. I don't care who's in charge. I don't care if it's Forsaken. I don't care if it's Dragon Reborn. I don't care if it's Trakand.
But she does care that it's a Trakand.
Well,
she put on full formal dress when Elayne showed up. She cares.
She's obviously showing her support for Elayne, right? She's like, yes, the queen is in the house, right? Like, that's what she thinks when Elayne shows up. But she can't say it, so she's showing it through dress.
Yes.
Which Jordan does a very good job of. Like, people always complain, like, Robert Jordan spends so much time on dresses. And I'm like, because he's telling you shit. That's why he spends time on dress. Because people are communicating with their clothes in a way that, like, very few authors even bother to do. And if you pay attention to what people are wearing, you'll find out what they think.
Yeah. Fashion as a storytelling device is something that gets neglected in a lot of fantasy. It's not neglected in the real world. It's a very real thing in the real world, so it should be in our fantasy.
But like, there's, most people, you can look at them and know a lot about them based on what they're wearing, what they're representing, if you got t-shirt with writing on it, if you've got wearing a suit, if you're wearing a hoodie and beanie, if you're wearing a cowboy hat and boots, if you're wearing, a sari, like all those things, like, my God, they all tell you very different things about that person and who they are and what their life is like. And down to even more subtle things, like, do you have your collar popped or not? Do you roll your sleeves up or not? Like, do you grease your hair or not? Like, all those things are...
Which brooch are you wearing with that jacket?
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So...
Everything from really frivolous fashion through, like, really intense statements that have profound political consequences because of what a woman wore to a dinner. Like, these are all very real things from the real world, and it's nice that RJ incorporates that into his sweeping epic fantasy.
I think a lot of people who work in offices have just been stuck in business casual their whole lives, don't realize that.
Yeah. I also like the line with Reena Harford where Elayne notices her like eyeing the sea folk because the sea folk got around her to get to Elayne, and her round face hardened momentarily at the sight of the Atha Anmir women who had bypassed her, but that was all the notice she gave them, for now. They would learn to their cost what incurring the animosity of the first maid entailed. I like that. Again, why she's one of the easy, like the favorite really minor characters is because it's like, you know, the sea folk who are an annoying, barely on screen character group are getting like, they have a whole drama of like lukewarm water and like beds that aren't turned down and like food that gets delivered cold and like all that.
And the trash doesn't get taken out until it's overflowing. Yeah, just all the little slowdowns and annoyances that happen when you have to depend on waitstaff to survive.
Yeah, always be nice to the waitstaff. And that applies even more when you're living in their house.
Tip your servers.
Yes. And then what she's here to say is Mazrim Taim has arrived.
And he's coming because she summoned him to basically chew him out for stealing a chunk of Andor for the Black Tower.
And she sent him that summons 2 days ago. So basically, like, her day one activities as a queen candidate was to summon him. And he put her off for 2 whole days before showing up.
Mm-hmm. It's like, yeah, you carved out a 4 square mile of Andor. And I mean, it is just a fucking field somewhere in the middle of nowhere. So it's not like he took a chunk of Camelin or something like that.
Sure.
Right. But it is a equivalent to the downtown. It's like 4 square miles is not a small chunk of land.
It's a small city. Like, especially in the scale of cities in the world that we're talking in. Like, yeah, that's a huge piece of Andor to just cookie cutter out and make into its own internal sovereign nation. Like, as a queen, she's kind of obliged to be pissy about it.
But at the same time, might makes right. Like, she even acknowledges, like, I can't force my way in, right? Like, you're essentially one of the 2 big powers in this world right now. Like,
might makes right. And this is the Dragon Reborn attempting to get the world armored up or weaponed up for the last battle. Like, maybe this isn't the hill to die on. Maybe you have bigger issues than this. But also, Taim is an absolute loose cannon, and it makes sense for her to try to assert some kind of communication and authority, and the fact that she's not going to be a pushover for him. Like, but yeah, it's also like, might makes right, and this is honestly something that needs to happen somewhere. If all the countries were to happen, and Andor is a good place to do it. Any
idea who the 2 Ashaman with him are?
No, I tried looking it up and I couldn't find anything.
I guess we could probably figure out from the descriptions, but they're 2, I'm going to say it Dark Friend Ashaman, because they've been...
Definitely.
Like, they're with Taim, they've been raised to the sword and the collar, they don't carry swords, right? And Rand wants them, so that means they, like, depend entirely on channeling, which is something that Taim is... for. Like, he doesn't really think that they need swords.
Yep. They have the 2 pins. They don't have a sword. Taim brings them on this mission. Yeah, they are definitely Tweedledee and Tweedledum Dark Friends.
I like that she spots the imitation dragons on his coat sleeves that imitate Rand. He's like, again, Taim is trying to elevate himself to the ruler of the Black Tower, but he's using the Dragon Reborn imagery to do that. And it's all in the name of the Dragon Reborn.
Yep. Elayne and all the other women reflexively reach for Sidar and jump into a circle together. All their animosity gets set aside. In one unspoken instant, they become a circle that Elayne is leading. And it's just a whole, like, Mexican standoff with sardonic commentary.
Well, and Taim says, hey, chill out. There are only 2 Aes Sedai here. What are the 2 Aes Sedai? I thought there's only 1. Like, Elayne is the only Aes Sedai in the room, right?
Morel's in the room.
Oh,
Morel slipped in at the back of the Seafolk entourage.
I missed that.
But she's glad. She doesn't want to be the center of attention. She's trying to avoid notice. So, good job not noticing her.
Yeah. But there are lots of other channelers, female channelers.
Only one more. There's only the Windfinder.
No, okay, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, there's only 3 channelers, but Elaine's like, well, he emphasized 2. Does that mean that if I have 3, I have an advantage? And it's like, no, not against him and 2.
I think it's more like there are 2 of them and 3 of us type situation. Like, there's more of us than them, and we could kick their butts.
Yeah, and then she draws on the power super, super hard. Like, she goes from 0 to 60 in no time flat. She goes all the way up to the danger point with holding the power. just in that moment. And she's thinking, oh, with that much of the power in her, she could lay waste to the palace, which is, a nice callback to what just happened to Rand at the end of the last book, laying waste to half the palace.
But hasn't actually happened yet.
Right. Will be happening in, 2 days, I think we worked out? Yeah.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, or the next day, something like that, yeah.
So it's foreshadowing. She's having a thought that foreshadows what's going to happen to Rand and Min, basically, in, just a couple days.
And then I like Mistress Harford talking about sneaking rats.
Yeah.
And then has to, come up with this whole excuse. She said it too loudly, so she has to, make up this whole thing about sneaking rats. And then Elayne's like, oh, yeah, I can deal with the vermin later. You're like, yes, these assholes.
Yeah, while just locking eyes with Taim. Vermin can be dealt with later.
But I like how that brings us back to the beginning of the series, where we have rats in the White Tower for the first time, and that's also sort of the reference to the Black Ajah, and sort of, yes, the Black Ajah and Taim as the Dark Friend, sort of, are both referred to as vermin in this chapter.
I hadn't noticed that, but you're right. We've got a real rats, Dark Friends association threading through our institutions that we value so much here in this prologue. Yeah. So they do a bit of power play stuff with posture and talking.
Dylan and Brigida both have drawn their knives just in case.
Yeah, Zaida has drawn her knife. She's still standing behind the kaleidoscope, but all the belt knives are out of their sheaths.
Right. It's Taim is very obviously a threat here.
Yeah, and everyone is armed to the teeth within 15 seconds. And he's just I'm dangerous. That's pretty cool. That's why I should be a Forsaken.
So, and he sort of does this whole hey, I heard you took down the dragon banner. He's going to be pissed off. And she's like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah, she's like, I'm not a conquered province. How about you go stick it where the sun don't shine?
Right. And he goes, and after he sent you a gift too from the south, I'll have it delivered later. And
she's wondering what gift it is, and we don't get that resolution in this chapter. And it's the captured Suldam and Damani from the Altaran campaign.
Not really a gift, right? It's oh, here's an obligation of people for you to deal with, right?
Yeah, Rand is I don't know what to do with them. I guess I'll send them to my powerful girlfriend who can probably deal with it. She won't hate that, right? And it's
yeah. It's kind of like buying somebody a puppy,
I was just
right?
thinking that. Yeah.
It's an
Surprise
obligation.
puppy.
Yeah, exactly. I wasn't really expecting this thing I had to take care of, and I'm kind of busy, but thank you.
Right, yeah.
She uses Rand's name, and Taim is like, oh yeah, I bet you would deal with him, wouldn't you? Wink, wink. And she's like, well, yes, but I didn't want you to know that.
Right. It's yeah, not for the reasons that he thinks, but it's hard to have that subtext not read that way in this situation. And she just has to live with that. It's kind of like the lie she has with Mellar later about oh yeah, he's the father of my child. It's well, this is the uncomfortable fiction that makes more sense right now.
And they do it back and forth, and she's like, I'm going to have my people come there every day and inspect it. And he's like, sure, yeah, no problem, as long as they don't, cause any trouble and have escorts. But I don't know if that actually ever happens. We don't ever see it. It does?
It does. It literally, in Galena's perspective in this chapter, we see Elayne and Brigida on one of these escort trips in. But yeah, because basically she says, you've taken some of my kingdom. I can't get it back, but I want to have full access to see what's happening. And Taim's like, you going to make me? And she says, I don't have to make you. I can just make you waste your time traveling for food, or you can just let me in and I won't bother, blockading you. And he's like, it's so inconvenient. I'll just agree. Whatever. It's very politicals talking around each other and one-upsmanship kind of bargaining. It's bargaining. It's just bargaining.
It's bargaining. And he can't say no because technically he's part of the Dragon Reborn organization. And yeah, the way they deal with each other is very awkward and weird and
yeah. But I mean, he's just half-heartedly staying undercover until it's time to go full Dreadlord.
Exactly. Yeah. Because very quickly we see him basically lock all the gates and make sure nobody comes and goes without his permission. And there's this whole thing where he traps, especially once the Aes Sedai get bonded and attack. Have we seen Tovann yet attack the tower and get bonded?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay.
Yep. We'll be visiting with her in the lived aftermath of After the Shock. Yes, she got captured by Logain in the last book. Yeah, it's a real sticky mess, and Taim is not doing a lot to keep it under wraps. And Elayne and Brigida start spiraling in their anger at him, and Elayne has the presence of mind enough to try to tamp it down a little bit.
The novice exercise.
Yeah, which is, yes, when you're angry, count to 10, do a 30-second meditation. Like, this is, yes, how to control your mind. Be aware of what you're doing. Stop for a second. It's very hard, but, novice training is a boot camp for meditation. You will have a level of control over your own mind at that emotional level from all that training, which is cool. And
so just as she's about to tell him off, they've been going back and forth for a while now, like a couple of pages, and she's about to escalate, and then it is time, Elayne Trakand, and we get the beginning of the sister ceremony,
the first sister bonding ceremony, and that is where we are going to leave it for today.
Right. Because we are 2.5 hours into this recording, and I don't think we have the energy to do it.
No, I actually have other things I need to do with my life tonight, even.
Right. Because we're going to spend another 2 hours on this sister ceremony. There's so much in there.
Oh, yeah. And then there's more POV to get through with this here prologue. So, yes, that's where we're cutting it for today. Thank you so much for joining us.
There is no Zool, only prologue.
Yes, very much. And, yeah, come back next week for the next segment, which, may or may not be the conclusion of the prologue. We'll see how much time we spend riffing on how much nakedness there is.
Well, yeah, thank you for joining us, everybody who's here live and everyone who's listening. Really appreciate it. That's always an interesting bit to get through with Elayne.
Yeah, this is, we're getting into Elayne stuff. That's what this book does. So yeah, please remember to like and review the podcast, follow us on social media, donate to our Patreon where you can find ad-free versions of the episodes, and follow our Instagram for the weird memes that I'm going to be posting to go with this episode.
And I'm happy to be back after a week break. Thanks for tolerating that. We always like to take a little bit of a break between books to give our batteries a chance to recharge.
And by recharge, we mean do a bunch of other work that we were putting off because of recording.
Yes, there is that. There's a reason the SpoilerCon website got updated last week.
Yes, very much so. One thing I want to talk about before we get into it. Yesterday, I did a hangout in the WotCon Discord server. They're getting people in there and chatting, and we're starting to talk about pre-travel or how we're getting, traveling from the airport to the hotel. People are starting to organize some stuff, and they ask content creators to do these little hangouts and just hang out and chat. And so I did one yesterday for an hour and 45 minutes, and it was really fun. Just chatting with 7 or 8 people that came in and out. Some people were muted, some people were really talkative. I'm really excited and the hype is getting real for WotCon. There's so many people that I'm I know you. Oh my God. Or I'm just starting to meet them. And the vibes are really good already.
I'm super excited to go to WotCon to watch you be at WotCon, because this will be your first con where you get to meet other content creators, other than a couple who came to SpoilerCon, where you're not running the con. I mean, as we said, SpoilerCon, which we need to do a promo for. SpoilerCon is coming, but that is something where it's more of a gathering of a small gathering of a few people who like WoTSpoilers. WotCon is going to be 1,000 people. I don't know what the attendance is at this point, but
I don't think it's 1,000, but
I wouldn't be surprised if it got close.
I that's not a part of the conversation I followed.
No, me neither. So don't quote me on that. But yeah, I can't wait to see you meet all these people and have your first real con experience. That's going to be half the fun for me, is going to be watching you, right?
And the weird part that most people don't have when they go to cons is most people when they go to cons, they don't have fans that are excited to meet them.
Yeah.
With a one-directional relationship because they've never talked to you before, but they've listened to you talk a bunch. There was a couple of people in this hangout yesterday that were like, oh, we're so excited to meet you. We've listened to the podcast forever. I'm just like, so all of you out there that are doing that, I'm very excited and also very tripped out by the fact that this relationship exists and we are all going to meet at WotCon. And yes, that's going to just be popcorn in the background watching this happen.
Because the first couple of times that happened to me, I froze hard. I was like, you like what? No, you're not real, bro, right? Let me let you know. And so, yeah, and now I handle it no problem. No, I don't handle it no problem. I still get embarrassed as hell and flush, but I do handle it better than I used to. And I'm excited to see you have to deal with that because you've been doing this now for quite some time.
I have, and I'm very excited for it. I have always wanted to be a performer. Like there was a lull there when I didn't know what my path for performing was, but like. This definitely hits all of my I want to be on stage, center stage buttons that I haven't really gotten to exercise since like high school. It's amazing. So I'm very, very excited. And I'm glad that I did that hangout because it gave me a chance to actually hang out with a small group. So when I meet those people, right, we'll already have a little sub click of vibes because we hung out in that one chat and nobody else did. Only the 8 of us did. So,
well, and you know, lesbian. I don't know how many people are going to be there, but I think like Lesbian Nerdy's going to be there. Rob's going to be there. TVAD's going to be there. Isn't Allie and Gus? Aren't they going to be there?
I think.
Yeah,
so.
like Allie and Gus are going to be there. These are just people that I know, and those are just a few I can name off the top of my head.
No, it's wild the fact that I'm going to know like a good third of the people, like on some level, like I have talked to them one-on-one. Like, again, not a normal experience for most people going to their first con is, oh yeah, I already know a shit ton of people here, like because I've actually interacted with them in a meaningful way. And
I feel like this is going to be different than even Jordan Con, because Jordan Con is people who love Robert Jordan and some Brandon Sanderson fans. And like, I remember the first time I really went to Jordan Con, like 4 or 5 years ago, there weren't really a lot of content creators, and that wasn't really part of the con. Like, there's a couple of people that recognized me, but that wasn't really the point of the con. WotCon is about the content creators.
Yeah, which is, I'm very excited for that element, because that is how I got into fandom, is through content creation and all of that. So it feels like an even more like safe little on-ramp into the concept of going to a con that isn't me and 10 of my friends in Portland. Not 10, tens 30 of my friends. Yeah. That's what I was trying to say. Yeah, so that's just, plugging that. And then, SpoilerCon? Do we need to...
SpoilerCon! So, we've been gushing about WotCon, right? And WotCon is this big thing. And WotCon has really sort of taken over this, like, having panels, big events, content creator type thing. And that really gave us an opportunity to take SpoilerCon and really just make it what it was originally, which is a get-together of people who like WoTSpoilers and the Wheel of Time, and who want to come to a group get-together on the West Coast. And registration is now open, right? You can now go to spoilercon.org and actually register for the event. It's $50, which is, we've cut the price down significantly, like half of what it was before. What does that mean? We're not providing food. We're not providing a lot of content. Right? This is very little content. This is a chance for us to get together and hang out in a hotel lobby together. Last year, we found that there's so many food carts and restaurants nearby. People would prefer to go to those. So we didn't try and provide food for everybody. There will be snacks. There will be like a snack room. We'll still be doing like a con suite room where you can get food if you need it and drinks and stuff like that. But there'll be, snacky food. And it's just going to be a chance to hang out with people for 3 days. We'll have a costume contest. We'll have a live recording. We're still having Michael Kramer and Kate Redding, who are going to do a Skype call, and they will come in and they will do a reading and answer our questions. And we'll do a fundraiser, so an auction and a fundraiser, and those donations go to Books for Prisoners, so that Michael Kramer and Kate Redding will show up. Right? That's what that fundraiser is for. But most of that is going to be, a couple hours each day max. And then the rest of the time is going to be like hangout time in a lobby together with other Wheel of Time fans.
I think there's going to be an expedition to Powell's because, well, first of all, Powell's, but also we have now received rumors that Robert Jordan has a signature on the wall.
He does.
In Powell's.
Yep, he does.
So there's a scavenger hunt mission that I think some of us are going to need to go on. Obviously, we're going to be directing people in various directions where you can go hike through beautiful Portland, Oregon. So yeah, we're just like, this is a podcast specific con rather than a Wheel of Time themed con. Yeah, and who knows? Maybe we'll manage to do the group tattooing thing again with all the spare time. We'll be able to go out and I'll be able to get my second raven. Yep. I only have one of the nodding ravens, and Seth still has no ravens or any tattoos. And I'm determined that you should get the nodding ravens for your first tattoo.
I mean, I'm not against it.
So if we can, with all this spare time, maybe we can find a tattoo parlor that can do a bunch of rowdy nerds with little ravens.
Again, go to spoilercon.org. Registration is there. There's a lot of details. There's a few things to be announced. We do have a room block. I need to contact the hotel again. They haven't given us...
Oh my God, they still haven't gotten you the code?
They haven't gotten me the code yet. So that should be on the website ASAP. I'm sorry, it's not there yet. That's definitely a failing in communication. The person who we were talking to is no longer there. And so I've had to escalate it up the chain to find out what that code is. We will get that out. I'm assuming it's going to be SpoilerCon.
It seems reasonable, but yeah, it just don't book your rooms yet because we don't have the code yet.
Yeah, but we do have a room block.
Yes, there will be a room block, which means it'll be cheaper than going normally to these rooms. And please head over to spoilercon.org, get registered. And I guess you can follow us on social media. We'll probably post once or twice, but honestly, this is probably going to be the vast majority of our marketing because you, the audience, are the only people we want to show up. So. And
dates. The dates are September 23rd through the 25th.
Yes.
Of 2022. So the last weekend in September.
Yeah. I'm going to have a busy fucking September. It's going to be my third back-to-back weekend of events. It's going to be great. But yeah, we'll be recording somewhere in the teen chapters of this book, I think, is about where we're going to be. Somewhere in the teens. I'm not sure exactly where, but yeah, stay tuned to the Discord and ask us questions, I guess. And otherwise, hopefully we'll see you there for some good times hanging out. And yeah, hopefully we'll be able to talk up a bunch of people at WoTCon about this. Definitely. Because we do create the same vibes. It's just much more itty-bitty.
Yeah, it's much more itty-bitty. And the nice thing is, both Jordan Con and even really WotCon are East Coast cons. Like, people in Ohio will be like, no, we're the Midwest. I'm like, no, you're the fucking East Coast. I'm sorry. Like,
it's the East Coast time zone. I thought they were Central time. Nope. It's Eastern time. So no, you're the East Coast. I'm sorry, guys.
So like, this is a chance for people who can't get across the country to at least hang out with other Wheel of Time fans on the West Coast.
There's a lot of people over here on the West Coast, so it makes sense to hang out, especially with you and me living so close together. Right. It's like, no, we should
do it.
Create a thing. So, recording in progress.
Recording.
Not courting.
We've already courted. Yeah.
We've already gotten the courting out of the way. Yeah. Don't know what courting is, but we've done it.
Okay, when Rand and Min get really freaky.
It would be Min that would be into that. Yeah.
There's some courting that goes on.
Definitely. I mean, maybe that's what they call it in the Third Age. They call it roping in our age and courting.
It's like the difference between when Rand talks about like weaving a net versus like creating a weave or whatever. Yeah,
weaving versus spinning a net. Yeah, exactly. So what's up in your life? What's up with you? What are you doing?
Geez. Work is really dominating. Fun personal drama. I'll go ahead and include this because it's fun. Never's sister, her boyfriend has been cheating on her for a year and got caught. And so there's been some personal drama around that because we've been able to like throw him out of the house and do a few other little, it's been a sort of the concentration. Let's see, what other personal things? The bird that I grew up with, the Harper, had to be...
Yeah, we've heard about her on the podcast before.
Yeah, she had to be put down. So I lost a childhood pet this week, so I'm kind of bummed about that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. It's been a busily weird week with like personal stuff and like, yeah. Because she was only 30, which is still pretty young for a blue and gold macaw, but she jumped off her perch and hurt herself pretty badly. And so it was just like not really any coming back from that. So it was sort of a freak accident, unexpected and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, that's personal tragedy and then family sort of drama. So it's like I said, I'm a little tired today. So that plus work which has been busy. I'm just a little been dragged over the coals this week. So
that is rough. I'm really sorry to hear about that because I mean we've heard about Harper on the podcast before. Like we all know her, so we are all collectively mourning with you now.
So she's. And I expected to inherit her at some point, right? Because she's like, those birds live to be like 60, 70 years old, and she's younger than me. So I expected, I always had it in my mind that she would be mine, and she always, I was always her favorite. Like, I sort of expected to have this pet at some point in my life that I did love, and really, it's. And again, because she wasn't living with me, I've had a little trouble processing it because nothing's really changed in my life. But at the same time, like I know that she's no longer around. So, it just hits me every once in a while. I'm just like, oh, now I'm sad. Shit.
Right.
And, birds are so intelligent. Like they're not pets in the same way dogs are. They're more like having a toddler. Like they're they're like smart enough to be almost a child because they have like... She says my name when I walk in the room. She when she wants to play peekaboo, she'll go pick up a towel and hand it to me and say peekaboo. Right? There's a certain amount of just like intelligence that birds have that make them in some ways more and less than a pet, than a dog or a cat.
I've never interacted with a bird like that, but I have interacted with a lot of chickens that were a few of the ones in the flock were like pets kind of chickens because they were smart enough to want that relationship with the person raising them. And a lot of the other ones didn't. Like I have been around birds that display that kind of above and beyond intelligence, albeit of a different species.
Yeah. And just parrots, have another, I mean, chickens are smart, but parrots are even smarter, on that,
Right, exactly. So, yes, Gallus domesticus is not, not a parrot.
So, yeah, and I fed her when she was a baby and had, just pin feathers. I would, make up her, I'd come home, I was in middle school, and I'd come home from school, mix up her food and feed her off a spoon, and hold her until, and then, she always very much loved me, and I loved her. She was a good bird. And that being said, don't have birds as pets. Like they're terrible pets. They belong in the wild. I don't support the industry that brings them home as pets. I don't think that you should ever go out and get a bird as a pet, or at least a macaw. Right.
Right. Like the caged in the living room bird that like isn't even flying or, there's an argument for backyard free range chickens. They're getting to chicken to a certain extent. But
these birds are designed to fly around rainforests. They are not. And that's what killed her. Right. That is literally she jumped off her perch and tried to fly, but had her wings clipped and she fell and died and hurt herself enough to have to be put down, right? That it's the caging and the confinement that ended up killing her. So, here's my shout out to like, don't support people who breed birds. Don't support even the ethical breeders. Like, I don't support them.
No. Pour one out for this one bird, and then actively do not support anything that brings more of that situation to come to pass.
And then on a whole meta level, like, stop chopping down rainforest, please. If we can, like, somehow.
Yeah. If you could leave the rainforest alone entirely, birds and all.
Right.
Yeah. No, animal captivity is mostly completely fucked. The vast majority of it is entirely fucked. There's a really cool bird sanctuary in Eugene, kind of between where we live, where you can go see a bunch of raptors up close, but all of them are unable to be released into the wild. Like they're all like injured or imprinted on humans or whatever. So it's like there's the weird guilt of, I'm getting to see a bald eagle up way too close, but also like it would literally die if it was out in the world because it like struck a power line and got electrocuted and its wing is fucked. So like, you know, that's almost every situation we see an animal in a cage is fucked. And even when it's not fucked, it's still fucked.
Right. No, same thing. You know, this bird, I would love to have had a chance to not have her as a pet anymore, but there's no way she would be able to survive in the wild. Certainly not here, right? Like not.
Oh God, yeah, no. Pacific Northwest is the wrong rainforest. It is a rainforest, but it's a temperate rainforest, not a tropical rainforest.
Yeah, different T words makes a big difference.
Yeah,
and so and that's a decision my parents made when I was too young to know better. You know, so
yeah. You got to make life good for the creatures once they're here, and that's the situation. You have to like do right by them, but yeah, don't get into that situation if you can avoid it, and discourage people you know from doing it.
Yeah, exotic pets aren't pets. They're not domesticated, right? They're wild animals living in your home.
Yeah, and generally, a lot of people I feel like treat pets more like toys than like sentient creatures, even creatures that have really become domesticated and could be doing great. They're not getting the respect as actual people that they deserve. It's a thing.
And I feel like that's something that actually millennials and beyond have really changed in our culture, at least here in the US, where we're treating, you know, cats and dogs like children, like, you know, intelligent living beings as opposed to possessions, which is how my parents and most of my parents' generation treated their animals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. The children and animals should be seen and not heard, right? Yeah, it's no, they're sentient, different kind of sentient.
Definitely
than us,
different kind.
But you know, they are very much people.
Yeah. My dog is people too.
Yes. And you know, the only people that are not people are mosquitoes. They are not people. They are actual
insects. I'm willing to kill. Like there's no insect that I have. You know, I empathize with them because that's what my brain does because I'm human. But like insects are basically, you know, machines that have an operating system that's, you know, fairly independent, but like, no.
It's very hard to have empathy with creatures. And I find my empathy is in direct proportion to when our last common ancestor was. So insects are just real hard. Yeah. It's just real hard. On the other hand, then there's octopi, which is not hard. And we're probably more closely related to octopi than to mosquitoes.
Oh my God. Did you watch that scene in The Boys?
I'm not watching The Boys. I have made the choice to not watch The Boys.
That's fair. That's an entirely it is a brutal show. It's bloody. It's hard to watch. And I understand why someone would not want to watch it. But there's a scene where they make the guy who talks to sea creatures eat an octopus. And he's like, but he's my friend. And they like make him eat him alive, and I had to skip that scene. All the blood, all the guts, all the like terrible murder, like that's the one scene I actually had to skip.
That's incredibly fucked up and further supports my solidity in being like, nope. The things people are excited about this show is why I'm going to say no.
Right.
But I like certain kinds of brutal violence if it's medieval, you know? Like, give me like Vikings or The Last Kingdom. Like, that's fine. That's fine. But
The Witcher type stuff, yeah. Yeah,
The Witcher is like so cheesy that I can't help but giggle for most of it.
It's modern day Hercules and Xena.
Right, which I never actually watched, but I'm familiar with what they are. Yeah.
I watched the crap out of Hercules and Xena back in the day. It's a shame that he's turned out to be such a political crazy person on Twitter.
Which he are we talking about?
Whoever played Hercules. The actor.
Okay. That is a bummer.
It's a bummer.
Never let your heroes get Twitter feeds.
Kevin Sorbo. Thank you, Little Jim. Yeah.
Never heard of him.
He was Hercules on the 90s Hercules TV show. That's really all he's ever done.
Cool.
Thank you for listening to the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Rate us in the Apple Podcast app or
support us on Patreon. Is that good enough?